Men are not toxic. Men are the answer. Welcome to the ReMasculation Podcast. Men are not toxic. Men are the answer. Welcome to the ReMasculation Podcast. This show is dedicated to the exploration, celebration, and pursuit of healthy masculinity in the modern world. I'm your host, Michael Bates. My mission is the conscious evolution of men and masculinity across this planet in our lifetime, one man at a time. I'm a coach, men's work facilitator, psychedelic integration guide, writer, speaker, poet, musician, athlete, and both a consultant and practitioner in the realms of conscious relationship and sacred intimacy. Welcome to my playground. And today I am distinctly honored to welcome my good friend, James Eshelman. James is a psychedelic guide, an integration coach, a men's work facilitator, and life coach. Over the last 5 years, he has guided over 1,000 individuals in his work, including in the co-facilitation of 70-plus group ayahuasca ceremonies and over 150 small group and one-on-one psilocybin ceremonies. His psychedelic guiding and integration client work focuses on aligning the unconscious with soulful embodiment in order to direct life force energy towards meaning and purpose. His men's work invites men to embrace the fullness of their masculinity through embodiment practice, counsel, and the integration of their feminine energy. In his personal work, he has engaged rites of passage, spiritual initiations, plant medicine work, and retreats with various spiritual masters in order to cultivate a presence of being that serves his life and his clients. James, welcome to the podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm just so excited for everyone to learn about you and the amazing work that you do. We are having this conversation here on March 6th, 2023. We are a few months out from the passing of Prop 122 here locally in the state of Colorado. We're going to talk about today. That is a proposition that has, for the most part, in some ways, James will get into this, brought on the legalization of the use of a number of different medicines within certain constraints, but is certainly opening the door for allowing the state of Colorado to be a destination in a lot of ways for what we hope can be a really positive and profoundly powerful movement towards the integration of psychedelic medicines into personal development work, into coaching, into therapy, into ways that we can help people heal in a deeper and more profound way. So I'm just really excited to begin with you today, James, and would love to just have you perhaps introduce people to your mission and sort of what is it behind this amazing synthesis of psychedelics and men's work that you yourself are a part of and are, as a good brother of mine, we've done a lot of work together, leading and facilitating and all these kinds of things. Where do you see your mission in all of this and where are you coming at this from right now in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, my personal story, kind of paints a little bit of picture in regards to how I apply everything that I've gained over the last 6 years in stepping into this space. I was what I would call a corporate drone coming out of college and working in the finance space, and I just remember feeling something burning inside of me and having no idea what to do with it or where to go with it. And then I ended up meeting a teacher of mine, and he showed me a path that felt more real than anything else that I've ever experienced. And through the plant medicine work, began to discover what was most alive inside of me and where my gifts were best served in this world. And so much of that was that process was about removing pieces that didn't belong in order for me to see what actually was there. And so my work in how I engage with clients is, what do we need to get out of the way in your experience as a human being, whether man, woman, whatever gender, whatever persuasion, right, whatever race, and get through to the core of the essence that shines inside of you. And a lot of that has to do with subconscious story work, of navigating what frameworks of thinking have been adopted throughout life in order to maintain a certain status quo, or to hold you on the path of life that isn't as fulfilling as what burns inside of you. So I find that most of what I do is kind of almost subconscious reprogramming, bringing those elements in the subconscious out, making them conscious, and then molding them and working with them in a way that's in a greater alignment with the truth of the individual. And so, preparation and really has to do with that of navigating what stories and what pieces are at play here, and then dropping people into plant medicine space so that they can see, really feel what that light is inside. Because once you taste that light, once you feel that light, you can better recognize in the external world what isn't that. And that quality of discernment really helps you begin to choose a life path for you that's in greater resonance with your essence, with your meaning, with your purpose, right? And so then I lead people through an integration and help weave the pieces of wisdom that people gain from the experience together, so that they can then apply it to their day-to-day life, and develop a greater self-understanding, self-acceptance, self-love, and purpose and meaning in life. And it has a lot of beautiful implications for men in this work, because just jumping right into the deep end is a lot of men miss out on the opportunity to connect to the movement of the ocean within the body, and the felt sense of experience. And I found that psychedelics have a very tactile way of helping men access those places and remove the constraints that keep them from feeling. And once that feeling body opens up, the masculine side of men tends to step up and want to, be more engaged in life. And so it's a beautiful marriage of work and just the nature of society, culture, and also the gifts that these medicines offer to individuals, and particularly men.
Wow, man, it's so beautifully said. I love the piece that a number of pieces you said, but one particular that stuck out was removing helping men remove the constraints that keep them from feeling. And I think that's such a crucial piece that for so many men in my own journey and the men that I talk to, it's hard to know you're unconscious when you're unconscious, because by definition, you're not conscious. And I was just talking to another brother on a podcast about the quintessential masculine shadow of disassociation, of being disconnection from yourself, and the things that you do because you're so disconnected from your own body. And I'll echo you on that in a big way, James. My own experience of plant medicine and psychedelic use to reassociate me and help me reassociate to my own body, and what I've been able to see, specifically for men, what becomes available once you are able to reconnect to your capacity to feel and sense things again, and realize that it's not something that is unmanly. It's the most manly thing in the world to be able to feel deeply and have that deep sense of intuition alive in you again in so many ways.
Yeah, I mean, very much so. I mean, the body itself and as a system is much more evolved. It has evolved over a longer time than the brain, and it's got an amount of wisdom that is largely, as men, we sort of turn off from that, or we've been forced to turn off from that by the culture of masculinity as it's evolved through time. And so we limit ourselves to this, data input system that's enormously intelligent, that provides incredible amounts of information about our surroundings, our connections, our experiences as human beings. And so it's really, in terms of living a life well lived, it's an incredible advantage once those systems become alive and sensitive enough to feel the environment, and then clear enough to be able to discern, what that environment or what a connection is communicating to me through my body.
Yeah. And what a level up that is, what a advantage that is in so many ways. I think that's why we see a lot of the tech community kind of jumping on the bandwagon of like, oh shit, there's a resource here that can help. If we wanted to throw in a selfish resource for why these medicines, I mean, they do accelerate. They have the potential to, under the circumstances, right? Setting, sitter, the 3 S's that I talk about. And I would love to hear more about how you do that too. But under the right circumstances, these medicines really can be powerful allies in our journey towards wholeness. The making the unconscious conscious piece you spoke to, that's sort of at the core of at least the Jungian psychological model. So
yeah, I love that you throw sitter in there with set and setting, because I think the quality of the individual, whatever qualities that they embody and bring to the world, creates a measure of access to the individuals that they're working with. Different facilitators are going to bring different things to a space like that. And what they bring makes certain energies and experiences through the nervous system more available to the people that they work with. So I find that to be very fascinating. And I would add, kind of in addition to that would be, it's not an S, but I think it fits, which is matrix, right? Which is the sort of story around, the experience itself, as a human. What does that matrix look like before you take a journey? And what does that matrix look like after you take a journey, right? What's available to you before, or not available to you before, what's available to you after? And that I think provides a measure of safety and an experience, to be able to set those frameworks and those guardrails for people to have meaningful experiences and to know what's possible in that space. Because if we just blow the lid off and, go for broke, it's kind of Pandora's box when you get to that space, and can be quite challenging to navigate. So, I find all those pieces are very important for psychedelic experiences. Absolutely.
yeah. Maybe it's 4 S's. Maybe it's set, setting, sitter, and story. And for those of you guys that maybe are newer or just beginning your psychedelic journey, when we say the 3 S's or the 4 S's, typically it's the 2 S's, right? Setting and set and setting. Set being your mindset, the mindset that you can journey with. The setting, surroundings. So make sure that you're in a safe environment, that your setting is conducive to a positive journey, that you have what you need, that you're in an enclosed and safe environment. That mindset, how the vision that you're bringing into it, the sitter being who you're with, who you're physically with, who can support you, especially if it's a larger dose journey. But I love that, James, the story, and because that's really it. And this is where I know something that you and I have really jived on, man, and why I love your work and recommend your work so deeply to people, is that you are so focused on the back end integration of the journey. And I love hearing you describe the matrix of what's the story that you're coming into it with, and then what's the story that we're consciously creating through that process, a new way of being that can emerge on the other side with some specific and direct integrative work, which I know you're so good at. So what is it about that for you, James, that makes the integration so important and such a signature part of the work that you do?
Well, I think that what I guess to start off is to talk about really what I feel like what I bring to that space is so important to be able to listen deeply to people, and it's not just listen through spoken word, but what are people's bodies telling you? What is their posture telling you? What are their facial expressions telling you? So you're looking at this kind of total picture of a human, to gather up the necessary information to see where people might be leaving something on the table, right? Whether there's a story that they're telling them about themselves, telling you about themselves, and it just doesn't quite feel in resonance or sound like the most powerful and aligned version of themselves. And so bringing people into awareness of those pieces of the story, right, and peeling back the layers of the onion, to get down to what is really here, what are people actually working with? Because if you can get to the essence of what people are working with, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, what are their gifts, and leveraging kind of that understanding to help people find direction through life. Oftentimes within psychedelic journeys, there's a big revelatory process of feeling and understanding what that light is inside of me, that essence, that gift. And through weaving, you kind of get the opportunity, or integration, you get the opportunity to present alternative realities that might feel more real, more alive for people. Because when we get into these stories about ourselves, it's easy to recognize that a lot of the stories that we tell ourselves have been adopted by parents. We've taken on these stories from parents, from family members, from society, from classmates, from all kinds of people that have been involved. And it's not often, on occasion it can be true that those stories are resonant in our hearts, but oftentimes they're the very thing that's holding us back from seeing who we really are. Once you know who you really are to a degree, right? Like every single chip away at that stone, as you're kind of forming the sculpture of who you really are, you get closer to this masterpiece, right, of what lives inside of you. And so in order to have a journey that's really, really meaningful is to integrate all the pieces of the puzzle that show up along the way, from conditioned programming to limiting beliefs, through to the integration of that source energy that you experience within a psychedelic experience. And then how does that gift of source energy resonate to you in your life? And so observation and in the integration of an experience is really important, because as you move out into the world, what you begin to see is how the world is impacting you in a new way, how you're being received in a new way, and how you're impacting the world in a new way. And as you get to see those things, you start to be able to see the threads of your experience that are arising in your own story, and begin to work with those in a way where you're like, oh, okay, well, this is something that I've been telling myself that's actually been hindering my growth, hindering my ability to show up in the world, whether it's an insecurity, a piece of shame, some measure of dissociation. What am I dissociating from? What am I trying to hide from here so I don't have to feel it? That we kind of activate the part of us that is limitless, that is boundless, that has the capacity to feel the world in a new way, and to create a new story around how we're witnessing and filtering the world inwards, so that we can be more aligned with our truth.
It's beautifully said, James. Beautifully said. You mentioned Matrix earlier, so when you said, knowing yourself, it made me think of that scene, in when they go to see the Oracle in her home, and they're in the Latin phrase above the door, temet nosca, know thyself. And that what better way than these types of journeys to get in contact with that, to come up against those conditioned programmings that you named, the conditionings from our past, from our parents, that are creating the limiting beliefs that are inhibiting our ability to feel the gift of source energy that is always there, that can never be obscured, that borrow from the Christian tradition, nothing can make you turn away from God but you, whisper in your ear, but you have choice to close off things. And I know from my own experiences, the two most profound experiences of my life were the two psychedelic journeys that sort of started me on my my path in a lot of ways. I've always been on a bit of a spiritual path. It's hard not to be when your parents are hippies and your dad's a yoga teacher and, you know, all this kind of stuff. But that really embodied it in my own experience. So I love that, and feel again, what you opened with, the universalism of this experience. Like, identity is an important thing, but, you know, I've done enough work in this space, and I know you have too, we've had people from every persuasion, sexuality, skin tone, what you name it. And it's like, there's something beneath all that unifies us all, that this work has been so profound at expressing and teaching me about. And I always love thinking about that when it comes to psilocybin particularly, that it is a universal human entheogen that we know is grown on all 6 continents. You know, it's a truly human medicine that all peoples have had access to in some kind of way, shape, or form. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
so go for it.
See the mythology of that medicine play out in various different stories, from you know, Stone Age theory with, you know, the apes walking across Africa, or the early man, I should say, walking across Africa and hunting for sustenance, and as they walked across the plains, right, like picking the mushrooms up, and it made them better hunters, and allowed them to be in a greater coherence with each other, so that they were better, you know, better hunters, and that, you know, had some impact on the evolution of the human mind, and then all the way through to even, you know, Saint Nicholas and the Amanita muscaria mushroom, how you know, he would walk around with a big bag of Amanita muscaria mushrooms, delivering it to houses, and people would hang them from their mantles to dry them out, and from the trees outside, and so that they could eat these mushrooms, right? Like, so many kind of instances of that coinciding with Santa Claus and that whole mythology. So yeah, I mean, you see it play out throughout human history, and I think it is such a big part of our human experience, and so it's just so fascinating to watch it come online at this particular point in time in history, at least in the Western world, with you know, kind of the widespread you know, absence of embodied consciousness in the individuals that inhabit this land. So it's quite special to be witnessing it in kind of from the societal perspective, and also from the individual level, and all the clients that I've been able to work with, seeing the threads of experience that are so common across individuals. You know, when you get down deep enough into the human experience, we're living out certain myths, you know, of life lived, and the threads of experience are quite similar, and in a way sort of predictable. And so bringing awareness to those myths and the connection that individuals are you know, have to themselves and have to their own inner myth, you know, it's quite special.
I couldn't agree more. And I talk a lot about men's work as a technology, and I really see the G in these medicines as well, and their ability to bring forward that which is hidden in a lot of ways. And like you said, you know, bringing that into the Western tradition right now, all the different things that are coming up. And I know, like me, you're super curious about all these things, and just the different works from Brian Murarescu's The Immortality Key, where he talks about and dives into the Eleusinian mysteries, where we're pretty sure now at this point historically that what they were drinking in a over 1,000-year-old unbroken tradition in ancient Greece, that everyone from Plato to Socrates took part of, and that the entire culture was taking part in this psychedelic ritual that they think was an ergot derivative, so an LSD derivative, that was like in line with the stoned ape theory, that psychedelics were a part of the acceleration of human consciousness, that the acceleration of Western ideas that became things like Republican democracy and all these different things also may have emerged from this particular cultural exploration of psychedelic medicine use. And I've been listening to a lot of podcasts on this stuff, as I'm sure you have too, where there's biblical scholars now that are convinced what the ancient Hebrews were carrying around in the Ark of the Covenant was psilocybin mushrooms, what the soma that they speak about in the Vedas, they believe was Amanita muscaria brew. So there are these links that are sort of emerging now with a lot of the sort of archaeological possibilities that exist now. But it's really exciting in a lot of ways to see that. And there seems to be a lot of just positive, like you said, momentum moving in that direction.
Yeah, it's along the lines of the immortality key is that this vase that was depicted underneath the Vatican was a vase that was being used in the Eucharist, in Christian religion, as one of the most prominent rituals in the Christian church of drinking the blood of Christ. And the testing that they did on that particular vase that was stored at the Louvre in Paris, was shown to have ergot in the vase, and so I think there's a lot of relatedness to Christianity and to psychedelic use, and starting to see the walls of religious kind of dogma fall apart here as these medicines are coming online, and people are recognizing that the two actually can live together in symbiosis and actually present an opportunity to reach levels of spirituality that are promised or at least outlined in the Bible and in other religious texts. So we're stepping into a place of embodied spirituality at this particular point in at least Western society and Western culture, and it's awakening people to a greater degree of what religion has promised for a long time, which is the connection to God, connection to soul. And so what kind of a culture could we live in if we're all presented with opportunities to see more of God more often? So this is certainly an entry point, and still not to say that we're going to evolve through to enlightened consciousness in the next 10-20 years. We're steadily chipping away at all the harm that's been done over the last few millennia, and certainly over the last 50 years in the psychedelic space. But we're making meaningful progress, especially here in Colorado with the passage of 122 and seeing the way that Colorado in particular has been a leader in this space, and now we're seeing measures across the country begin to present themselves in various different legislative houses, and where there are ballot measures available, starting to see more talk of those coming online. So I think we're stepping into a really interesting time in not only mental health history in Colorado or in the country, but really spiritual health and spiritual well-being. So it's quite exciting.
It really is. You mentioned so many things that I want to touch on, and one, just to begin with, I think for me, I mentioned those two peak experiences of my life that happened to be my first time ever experiencing psilocybin, and then my first time actually experiencing MDMA, which is not a plant medicine, but completely changed my life. And it did so by very much creating an embodied spirit, an embodied experience of the divine that transcended the traditional third person experience of God, where you have a priesthood or a book or something in between you, and then the divine is over here. Me into very much a second person experience of I am talking to God, God is speaking to me, the in conscious, whatever you want to call it. For me, it very much felt like God, like this highest ideal of the reality of the originator of being itself, this deeply benevolent, loving presence that just permeated me in all capacities. And then from there, even slipping into the first person experience of I am that I am God, I am that I am. And it's just wild. And then coming back into my body, feeling like I'd slipped into the ocean, back into the ocean of the collective consciousness, and then back into the individuated drop. And, really feeling really grateful that I did have very unintentionally some profound integrative experiences through some people that were around that were able to help me really drop into that. But I mean, for I see with a lot of my people that go through this, and I know you do as well, it's like, yeah, like giving people religion back, like what it can be, what spirituality can be. At first, you get to experience that in your own way. No one's telling you how that should be or needs to look, but here it is. Check it out, so that's a thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's everything, man. My teacher, he's this, big jolly guy, and he's in his late 60s, early 70s, and he's been practicing for 50 years in various different spiritual disciplines. And he'll always just look at me with sort of a grin, sort of shit-eating grin on his face. And I'll just say, there's only one here, which is that, the ego produces illusion, the illusion of separation, of I am separate from you. And we see that play out in the various different arenas, from modern warfare to the way that we sort of combat each other, and because we combat ourselves internally, that combativeness moves outward, and we create conflict out in the world to mirror our own internal conflict. And that oneness of, there's only one here, allows us to access that place where we can believe that the world itself is a mirror for us to learn about who we are. And at that, through the core of it, and you see all the way through, you get to that place of God, of that first person experience that, on this earth, and as human beings, we're all just different expressions of the same consciousness, walking the earth as individuals, right? And in other words, we're God experiencing itself through a lens of 8 billion different sets of eyeballs, plus in addition to all the nature around us. That nature is in some ways the purest expression of God itself. And I find that to be so settling. At times it's certainly confronting when you're confronted with something that you really hate. But the pure expression of the mirror and what it provides and allows for is all just data that helps us better understand our place in the world, and what we're here to do as people walking, conscious individuals walking the face of a conscious planet. Looking at how to live a life that is, in its essence, an embodied God, which is, as you lean into the power of the depth of that meaning, it's quite incredible, and it's not hyperbole. I think it's true. And certainly how we define.
Well, you mentioned data too, and yeah. Like, obviously, like, speaking in these more esoteric, almost religious, experiential ways, it's like, I feel like that used to be kind of all we had, right? Is you had, some long-haired hippies, talking about, third eye guy, all these different things, right? And now we really actually have data to back these things up. These organizations, whether it's Johns Hopkins or MAPT, so many organizations doing the real science behind it that are providing the data that these substances are able to produce smoking cessation in 80% of the people that undergo the study. Like, that's unfreaking heard of. And the successes they've had with just the mitigation of PTSD, battlefield trauma with MDMA and all these different things. It's producing a state of neurogenesis in the brain that different parts of the brain, when you're under a psilocybin experience, are communicating with each other that wouldn't be doing that. And that it's not just, hippie conjecture and platitudes. There's some really real things happening here, which is I know we share this excitement, because it's like, hey, I've had people that have been really reticent. They've been really curious about it, but they're like, I don't know. I don't know if I can do this, or I have a real job. I work for a bank or this or that. I don't think I can do this. And I just send them the data. I always just send them, hey, check out this study. Hey, check out this study. And now, we do have Prop 122 that's come through, and I do want to speak to you about that. But I interrupted you there. I want to make sure I don't cut you off from something that felt like a relevant point, or would love to hear your throw into on the data piece.
Yeah. Well, it's Dennis McKenna talks about this study that his organization did down in the Brazilian rainforest with the Daime Church down there, and they had a number of people, and alcoholism in Brazil for men is pretty prevalent, and with men who got on a consistent regimen of sitting in ayahuasca ceremonies, it was shown to be somewhere in the 90th percentile effective of helping them, overcome their alcohol dependency, and even getting rid of the alcoholism, and it's so fascinating, because we sort of started off talking about dissociation, and I mean, certainly alcoholism and alcohol itself is a dissociative. So, helps us shut off a part of ourselves, and creates disconnection between ourselves and the outside world. So there's real data, and everything that I mentioned esoterically, like you said, it has real foundational roots, and is starting to be integrated with science, across various different disciplines. I mean, I think we're really just scratching the surface of ways that we can apply these medicines for healing. Virtually, there's an author by the name of Gabor, he's a medical doctor too, by the name of Gabor Mate, who's a trauma specialist, and he's done copious amounts of research in the space of trauma, and he simply defines trauma as a disease of disconnection. And I think that what we see within our Western society, the amount of stress that people are experiencing in their life, and the amount of trauma that they've had, and that source of disconnection is what's producing so much disease in the country, right? Disease. And so if we want to get to the bottom of the amount of disease that we have in the country, we've got to get to the root cause of it, which is, there's been a lot of research done to show that it is, very much related to stress and very much related to trauma. So this isn't just about healing spiritually or mentally. Let's throw in physically, as well. That's a big piece of this too.
Big time, especially with that trauma piece. And, you and I both have a men's work background, which is, I think, why we, just multiple layers of why we get along so well and have so much crossover. But, I first was brought in to assist a MAPS trained therapist who was very much working in the underground, for years and years, risking their license, in order to be able to help people in that, and to be able to come in, and particularly because she had guys coming in with battlefield trauma, emergency services workers, big guys with massive traumas, and then sort of bringing me in to sort of assist. And I had done men's work, but this is a whole other thing, and just getting to see firsthand what would come out of these guys, what they would go through, and what they would release, and what would be released from their body, the issues in their tissues, the somatic shaking and releasing that I would see, that, at first is a little unsettling, just because we're not used to that. Our medical model, our Western allopathic medical model, is so focused on the treatment of dis-ease as the treatment of the symptom, rather than going to the root of the cause and where it's coming from. And so, yeah, the utilization of these medicines to be able to, like you said, James, get at the physiology that is there underneath so many of these challenging experiences that people have an opportunity to get some clarity on, to get some relief from. It's a really beautiful and powerful thing. You know? I'm curious because I want to talk Prop 122. I want to give people a bit of an idea for what's going on here. I want to talk about what people who are curious, first timers, people who are starting to, they're watching Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind on Netflix. They're watching Fantastic Fungi. They're reading and learning about these things, but and they should be reticent. They should be cautious. Maybe this is a good way to get into that, is what should people look for, James, when they're seeking out a psychedelic practitioner, when they're seeking out whether it's a group experience or a one-on-one type of a thing. How would you advise someone, especially now that we're seeing, as with any renaissance, right? People popping up out of the woodwork. I'm a medicine space holder. I'm doing this. And, we joke about this, right? Somebody that goes to an ayahuasca session and the next weekend they're holding their own ceremony. How would you advise people to sort of wisely step in, and how can we discern people like yourself? And again, my full bill of confidence to work with James versus someone who is maybe with the best intentions, but is holding space without the degree of experience and real understanding that someone like yourself brings to the table.
Yeah, so I think in order to discover what direction to go, it's important for each individual to be really curious about what's there and what's alive for them. And what I mean by that is to be discerning about what kind of life has been lived and what sort of trauma someone might be working with, right? We sort of have this broad spectrum of the human experience happening, and I think if you're on the one side where you've had a deep spiritual practice and you've been on healing and working with a therapist, you've got a lot of resources at your disposal. That creates access to, in my experience, in my mind, not just working within the therapeutic model, but working within kind of the community healing model, where you can work with spiritual masters and people who've been sitting with these medicines within traditional capacities, and do a lot of not just trauma or deep trauma or even PTSD. I mean, certainly those will manifest and be a part of those journeys. But more so, I guess the distinction here that I'm trying to make is that if you've gone through a lot and you've had experienced a lot of trauma throughout your life, I would probably point you towards someone who's maybe more got a better medical background or therapeutic background to be able to support you through big challenges, because those people are very well educated in the Western medical model, and can provide particular interventions that might not be able to happen within kind of a more spiritual, esoteric kind of space. It's easy for maybe not easy, but it can be challenging to step into those spiritual, esoteric spaces if you've never had any experience with plant medicine before and haven't been on a spiritual journey. You don't have a whole lot of resources at your disposal. So I'd say, start with the framework that really makes the most sense for you and who you are and what you need in the world. And then, like I said, on the other side of that, people who've been in the work and can have the opportunity to kind of pick and choose from various different practitioners. I think when you get into that space, it's important to know who somebody's maybe not who somebody's apprenticed with, but how they've apprenticed, how they've come to know and understand the medicine that they've worked with, right? Because there are stories, like you said, about people taking medicine one time and then all of a sudden they're your guru, right? They're the shaman, and that's a dangerous container to be in. There's oftentimes not enough understanding of what happen in those spaces, what can go wrong in those spaces. And certainly, you know, the amount of journeys can be a proxy for how well trained and how experienced somebody is in that space. But, you know, it's like ask deeper questions about what's the quality of their container, how much work are they doing on themselves, what's their own practice of spirituality, and what gives them the authority to work with these medicines, right? Whether that authority comes from the community, or it's an authority that they only claim for themselves and the community doesn't really recognize that authority. So, you know, it's sort of nuanced in a way and not super prescriptive per se, but it's certainly a larger conversation. But, you know, we've with the How to Change Your Mind series and Michael Pollan book as well, and just the amount of public awareness about all of this, I think what we're seeing is a kind of an explosion of interest in this space. And it's allowing facilitators to come out from underground and be more publicly presented. And so we're kind of faced with a greater amount of choice, which I think is really important when you're considering a facilitator, because it is important to find somebody that's right for you, not only what's available in the moment. Just as kind of it's to find a therapist who has a model that's going to work for you and that you have a connection with. That's sort of a good proxy for that space, I would say.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, James, because I think there's a correlation with, like you said, with the therapy model, which is above ground, right? So good therapists, people go to them, people have great experiences, they recommend other people. Those therapists get essentially voted to the top of the therapy pile because they're good. I've seen a similar thing happen with coaching in the last few years. I'm not sure if you have as well, but I know, you know, a few years ago, it was like, God, my social media feeds is like everyone and their mother was a coach. To the point that it actually made me question, like, geez, maybe I shouldn't be in, it's like a saturated market, right? But what I've seen is that a lot of people that had the fancy marketing and advertising schemes looked really good, got some clients, and then guess what? They didn't actually know how to coach and couldn't deliver on that. And people talk about that. So it's like, if you're a good coach, you coach someone through a problem and their life transforms, they talk about that. If you presume to take someone's money and coach them through something and you don't know what you're doing and they don't get there, they're going to talk about that. So it's like, I hear you on that. I know that's something that a lot of people in the community have been talking about as it gets pushed above board, that there is that, what I see as a benefit to that same model of, well, prove it. You know, it's when you're underground, it's like people aren't going to talk as openly about things, that the pros and cons aren't necessarily going to get passed around as openly and as visibly as they would as things move above board in that way. So, yeah, that's something I think we certainly agree on. And in lieu of that, you know, if there's anything else you want to add to that, but how does Prop 22 or 122, excuse me, here in Colorado, how does it change that? What is this all about? Is it legal? Is it not legal? What can we do with this now, James, as someone that is very much, I would say, an expert in this particular new legislation?
Yeah. So I think the beauty of this measure is that it's kind of two parts. One part is the pure sort of decriminalization of these plant medicines, and the other is the legalization of these medicines in healing centers. And the way that I'm looking at this is there's going to be a licensure model that's created here in Colorado that's going to allow practitioners to operate legally as licensed facilitators by the state of Colorado. And I think what we'll see in all likelihood is that's where, you know, the therapeutic model will have a foothold, where a lot of therapists will get into this psychedelic healing space. But in the decriminalization piece of it, what's interesting, at least for now, and there's some talks of perhaps changing some of these elements that would sort of change the way that this is being interpreted now. But it essentially creates space for the community healing model, which means that I can still practice as a facilitator and not have to become licensed, which has a lot of advantages. my authority to practice with the medicine that I practiced with comes from the people whom I practiced for, right, and my community, and that's recognized by my business model, which is largely supported by word of mouth, right? Like that's how community works. Is I know this person is trustable, and so I'm going to transfer my trust to in him to you, which is a really when you get down to kind of these deeper traditions, like that's how trust was transferred to the facilitators who've worked with these medicines over time. So it's a beautiful model where I think both of these can exist at the same time. Because like I kind of alluded to, the therapeutic model is very good for these intensive cases that have to do with PTSD, major depressive disorder, debilitating anxiety, and these other health issues that not necessarily require medical intention, but will significantly benefit from, the medical model. But then there's on this deep crim side, what's beautiful about it is these underground or community facilitators, they all bring a particular gift to the space. And so by allowing them to continue to serve these medicines, without having to adhere to a licensure model, which would create a certain homogenous offering to a degree, these people who are operating in the underground, who by and large are like the essence of artists in their space, like they are artists of consciousness, artists of like human mastery and self-mastery, and they paint beautiful mosaics, for the people that they work with. And so I think it's a beautiful synergy, and I'm hoping that this model really sticks and stays here, because it's going to allow for, again, just like the healing aspect, but then also the spiritual impact, the spiritual wellness. I want to be the fullest expression of myself out in the world, and a therapist can help me get back to a baseline. But it's these spiritual masters, these people who've been operating in the community underground, who really are tapped into source God, right? And we can get into the more esoteric kind of embodied spirituality path through that way. At least that's the way that I'm saying it.
Yeah. I love that. And again, just to take the woo out of the spiritual idea, the spirituality, it's like, well, it's what I've seen is it connecting people to a deeper sense of meaning and purpose in their life. You can call it God, you can call it science, you can call it mission, you can call it whatever you want to call it, Yahweh, Jesus, Buddha, it doesn't matter. But seeing the effect of people that don't have a connection to something deeper than themselves. We have terms for these things, depressed and anxious generally, and seeing the evaporation of those symptoms, really, of the depression, of a fixation on the past and the things that happened to you, versus the anxious fixation on the future and the things you're worried about happening to you coming down the line. Getting in alignment, and I think maybe this ties into the men's work that you and I both do too, in the way that we, because of the processes we've gone through, the teachers that we've gone through with that have helped us get to the bottom of what's meaningful and impactful to us. At least for me, I feel like I'm now able to share from that place of being connected to a higher ideal, a sense of meaning that goes beyond just the day-to-day, that fills me with things. And I feel I'm going to say it, spirit moving through me at times where I don't, James, you joined me on this last Friday night for an experience that I co-led with, 70 women and 20 men in a room. And I've got a script for how I'm leading people through these embodiment and conscious relating practices, but it's like, I just watch myself kind of do that. And then something comes out and it's the right thing. And that wasn't on my script. That wasn't on the 2 little note cards I've got shoved in my back pocket, just in case I forget. We're not mutually exclusive, that the real world and the spiritual world fold together really beautifully.
This episode is sponsored and brought to you by One Golden Thread. The gold inside us is the thread that unites us. Conscious clothing for a more conscious humanity. Go to www.onegoldenthread.com to learn more. And here's a golden ticket for you. Use my personal code BATES11, that's B as in boy, ATES 11 at checkout for an 11% discount site-wide. OneGoldenThread.com. Get threaded.
So again, I see you as a man who's been able to encapsulate within himself the aspects of strength and sensitivity, humor, depth, kindness, killer instinct, all these things that I like to talk about, but that I think to me stand as testament to the quality and caliber of the work that you're bringing, James. Not to treat you too nice here on the podcast, but there's a reason I wanted to talk to you about this, and you're certainly a man that I appreciate and see doing really good work in the world and in this space. So,
yeah, likewise, man. I mean, we feed off of each other, and it's important for us to stand next to each other and to be these guideposts for the community as we've done a lot of work in these spaces that are helping a lot of people more fully embrace life, and we need people who are alive like in this world, and so the model that you're embodying, and certainly the expression of who you are in the world is that, to me, is the invitation into a greater source of connection and power. When that's modeled, the frequency and the and who you are as a man becomes more available to the men around you. So I just, and especially your power just emanates from your eyes, from your heart, from the fullness of your body too. It's really valuable to have men like you and the others in this community engaging with each other, because as we get together, right, iron sharpens iron, and we're all refining each other in really beautiful ways. So I appreciate all the roles that you play in this community and the work that we're doing together.
Right back at you, man. Right back at you. Yeah, I'm a firm believer that good men are not born, they're made. And there's something about that goes back to the rituals and the rites of passage, that, again, this pan-human, and in particular this pan-masculine idea, that if you look at the work of Joseph Campbell or anyone who was able to synthesize a lot of the ideas from so many different cultures throughout so much of human history, that there was this process of the male adolescent rite of passage of the boys cannot become men, they have to be transformed into men by other men. And that there's this sense that I've always felt of, like, where was this? Like, why didn't I get this? Who didn't teach me? Like, well, no one taught my dad and no one taught his dad. And like, where was this wisdom lost? And, I know that you'll be the first one alongside of me to say, I'm not perfect. Like, I am not presuming to have my shit together. Hey, like I always say, talk to my lady. You want to know how I don't have my shit together, talk to Touch. But I fuck up every day. But at the same time, there is something that I've learned from these rituals, these rites of passages, these teachers, and these medicine teachers that we're speaking about today, that have continued to chip away at my bullshit and allowed me to figure out how to embody these qualities that I think, and thank you for your compliment, that I wasn't always like this. These are things I can learn, and if I can learn them, anyone can learn them. I promise. Like, this is the collective wisdom of humanity that belongs to all of us. And I really firmly believe that. And again, the unifying thread in this technology, that these medicines belong to all peoples, and it doesn't matter what color your skin is, what your sexuality is, what pronouns you want to use. It doesn't matter. This stuff is here and it's available. So it's just exciting, man. It's a really exciting time. And I'll let you throw in if there's something you want to add to that, but this is a good segue to something I'd wanted to talk about, which is sort of the dark side of psychedelics, and what I've seen a lot of in the overuse in the quote unquote spiritual or conscious community. A lot of people sort of relying on these substances to be the person that they want to be at a party. But then there's no integration on the back end. That wonderful, I don't know if it's a direct quote from Jung, but when he was asked purportedly about how he felt about psychedelics, he famously said, "Beware of wisdom that you didn't earn." And so how do you see that, James? How do we avoid these pitfalls? Where do you see those things? And again, I know I just threw a lot of questions at you and a lot of things, but I'll let you pick it up and run with it.
Yeah, well, I see psychedelics as a way to access the upper room, right? That's where we can gain that wisdom, that unearned wisdom. And it's important though to bring that unearned wisdom back down into the ground, back into the body, and then live that wisdom day to day, and practice it. So what I see is without time, without integration, without a willingness to commit to some form of an embodied practice, whether whatever that might mean to somebody. I mean, it could be something as simple as sitting on a cushion and meditating, or going for mindful walks, or even to the extent of men's work, of like engaging in a men's circle and starting to get into some men's practice stuff, within the context of men. And so, if you're avoiding the lower room, if you're avoiding, this grounded presence, this grounded place, and just trying to reach into that upper room, that to me, signifies just a coping mechanism. There's something there that you're still looking to avoid, something there that you're not willing to confront. And in that absence of confronting that thing, are you really making any progress as a person? Are you really moving yourself forward, into being a more alive body in your body while you're sober? There's certain escapisms, right? In taking these substances, just to access a place that then, disappears when you become sober. And so, integrating those lessons is essential, and it's important to take time away from medicines. I went through about 5 years where I was sitting with ayahuasca every single month, sometimes multiple times a month, and it dropped me into a deep integration process that happened very quickly. And then I decided to take a step back about July of 2021, and have focused more on the embodied practice, on the men's work, because it's one thing to take a medicine, to experience that upper room. It's another thing to take the wisdom that you gain from those experiences and become the medicine out in the world, where you're now looking at the world as the with which you get to learn who you really are.
I love that, James, and that vision of the upper room. And then, yeah, to me, it's the delta between the upper room and then where you normally reside. And, I mentioned those two profound experiences that I had. I'm really grateful that I didn't have any psychedelic experiences when I was younger. I was an athlete. I was sober. I didn't fuck with that stuff. I was 26 when in 2006, I had that first mushroom experience, and it blew my doors off so hard that I was just like, I'm done. It's so profound. I'm done. I don't need anything. And I mentioned that other experience, which was in 2013 with MDMA, but there was an experience in between those two where I had my first experience with ayahuasca, and it was a horrible experience. It was in someone's apartment on 8th Avenue in New York City with people I didn't know. Someone there was like battling terminal cancer and had a full like body release of control, like in the space. And I was just the next morning, okay, see you later, bye. And I literally go from my first ayahuasca DMT experience to the streets of Manhattan in morning rush hour. And it fucked me up so much. It was such a challenging experience. It was just like, oh my God, like I didn't want to touch it for a really long time. And then it was a few years before the experience came back around where something inside me said, okay, it's time to touch this again. But I love that idea of taking the time, letting it integrate. And what is it that Alan Watts used to say? When you get the message, hang up the phone, So that idea of, once the thing has come through, it's like, okay, yeah, now go work on that. I bartended at a nightclub in Brooklyn called House of Yes. I helped open this place. It was a wild spot, man. And I'd see these kids in there on MDMA, same kids on MDMA every weekend. I'm like, what No. Are you supplementing at least? And like, supplementing, what are you talking about? I'm like, God, like there are ways to do medicine, and then there are ways to not do medicine. And I think it is really important for people like you and I, but for anyone, to just sort of call our brothers and sisters out, as I would want to be called out too. You know, when I see people that are doing a lot of medicine, and I don't see the change, you know, I don't see them necessarily as being a better person, or I don't see it translating in their regular life, you know. So it's tough. It's a tough thing.
Yeah. That's a great marker for how well, you know, you're integrating, is what are the quality of your relationships and how are those improving? Those close relationships are great mirrors for who you are, right? I mean, the old adage goes, you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if the 5 people you're spending the most time with used to become, you know, more embodied individuals and people who are living in a way that's in alignment with their highest values as individuals, you know, you're looking at that as, you know, that's great feedback that you are walking the path. And you know, along those same lines of what these psychedelic experiences are, man, it's like I get to jump up and I get to see over the fence, but then eventually I'm gonna come back down. If I don't go over to the other side and do something with that understanding of what's there, you know, nothing is going to change about what that looks like. That yard is still going to look the same. So the next time I jump up there, it's a lot the same. So, just another visual.
I love that, man. It's a beautiful visual. And again, why I trust you to be doing the work that you're doing. And speaking of that work, you know, for those of you who are out there listening who might be interested in taking a journey, and specifically in taking a journey with James, what are some things that people can expect from a journey with you specifically? What are the things that sort of set you apart, or sort of the specifics of how you work with these medicines, and what people can look forward to in joining you in these journeys?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think a lot of the gifts that I bring to this work is in the pre-work and the post-work. In fact, like the preparation and integration is probably my favorite part of this, in a way. And so I put a large emphasis into creating space and container for people to show up as themselves and share their story with me. And when I'm working with somebody, like I'm there, you know, everything in my being, in my body, in my presence is available. And I'm drawing on knowledge that I've gained from various different containers and my own study into human consciousness and the human experience to provide insight to people. And a lot of times, you know, it's in the pre-work and the post-work that most of the benefit is gained. Not to say that, you know, taking the rocket ship to the upper room isn't valuable. It certainly is quite special to be in that container too. So I typically work with large doses of psilocybin in the containers that I provide. So about 3 to 5 grams of a potent strain of mushrooms. So this isn't just like a therapeutic talk container. This is like, you know, what we're really going for here is accessing the space of potential, what's kind of colloquially known as an ego death. So that these sort of notions and constructs can fall away, and we can access those, that deeper space of wisdom and knowledge. And then, so I've got a short-term program that I work with people. It takes about 4 weeks to complete, with 2 preparation sessions, and then the facilitation of a journey, and then 2 integration sessions. I've also got a longer term container that's about 4 months, and that's I do 3 preparation sessions, facilitation of a journey, and 3 integration sessions, and then I repeat that process along with a regimen of microdosing. So supporting the neuroplasticity of the mind, you know, from the big major macrodose experience and the major neuroplasticity events in that large experience, and then supplementing it with the microdosing to prolong the intensity of that neuroplasticity event, so that people can begin to really rewire their brains to form, you know, greater connection and a more solid story moving forward about who they really are. Right? The old adage goes, what fires together wires together. So we've got to, like, as the brain is in this malleable space, get those neurons firing together so that, like, they begin to wire together, and that's the life that you can live, as that's the world that you see lens through.
Yeah. And that's the neuroplasticity event for those people listening who may not be familiar with the verbiage.
Yeah. The neuroplasticity is, what happens in the brain on these large dose psilocybin experiences is the brain gets flooded with serotonin, and the brain starts producing new receptors and creates new connections within the brain. That's what provides neuroplasticity to the brain. And neuroplasticity is the foundation of learning, and certainly, like, neurogenesis and like neural health overall.
Right. Yeah, the formation of new neurons, neurogenesis, the ability for the brain to make new connections that it doesn't normally make, to work in conjunction with aspects of itself that it wouldn't normally work with. And again, it's not just anecdotal hippie speak. It's backed up. There's the neuroscience there behind it now, which is what's so exciting about this work. And again, so exciting about the work that you're doing, James. And it's been a pleasure to have you, and just to get to riff with you on this space. And there's a couple questions I like to ask generally to my guests, but again, just as someone with this particular union of the men's work and the psychedelic space, what's the thing that you think men need to hear right now the most, James? What's the thing that you see from your unique perspective that men are needing or longing for the most?
That vulnerability takes courage, and through courage you find strength. Vulnerability takes courage, and through courage you find strength.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And because you gave such a succinct and direct answer, I'm going to squeeze in one final question, which is, what do you think women need to hear from men right now, or specifically from you? Or what do you want women to know about, I don't know, about themselves or you, or just the relationship to men and women that we're, the work that you and I do right now is so built around helping formulate ways for us to come back together and remember that, the left hand and the right hand at war doesn't do much for the body. So.
I'm seeing more and more men stepping up to stand in the fire and to let the parts of themselves die that need to die in order for them to hold women and love women in the right way. There's a lot more men that are stepping up to that right now than I've ever seen, and it's beautiful. So they're out there.
I love that you brought it to the death piece and the willingness of the pieces in you to let them die. There's something that I've taken to saying for my medicine clients that I got actually from Brian Marescu's book, which is a quote from something in a temple on Mount Athos in Greek. It's an pethanis prim pethanis dentha pethanis otan pethanis, and it means if you die before you die, when you die you won't die. So I think that's a incredibly beautiful connection of the men's work piece to the psychedelic journey of what it is that we're all here to do. So thank you for the work that you do, James. Again, just I know we both share this affinity for the benefits of the prep work before, the integration after. Those are the things that really make the psychedelic journey potent and profound. Where can people find you, James? Where can we find your work? Where can we find you?
Yeah, so my website is centerofalldirections.com. Center of all directions is an ode to the heart, right? It's the direction that all directions lead to and come from. So you can find me there. I'm also on Instagram at James Eshelman, Eshleman. And I share a bit on Instagram. Those are the places.
Amazing. And if you're lucky enough, you can run into James here in Colorado, Denver, Boulder area, as well as myself. James, it's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to have you on here, brother. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next time.